Hello, my friends. Thad Riley here, episode 278, coming at you today, called The Good Samaritan, the real story of the Good Samaritan. And the reason I say the real story is there's a piece of this that I think context gets left out when we talk about the Good Samaritan. But we're going to talk about the Good Samaritan. And I want you to hear this story straight from the scriptures, because we'll start there. We'll start by me reading it, because once you flow into this context, I think you'll see what Jesus is getting at. All right, so, and in this first part is the part that I think gets so left out of the discussion. Okay, so we start in verse 25 of Luke 10. And behold, a lawyer stood up to put him to the test, saying, Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? Jesus said to him, What is written in the law? How do you read it? And he answered, You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. And he said to him, You have answered correctly. Do this, and you will live. But he, the lawyer, desiring to justify himself, said to Jesus, Who is my neighbor? All right, so pause. So just pause. This is the intro to the Good Samaritan. This is the context that Jesus is having this conversation to, in the man he's talking to here. And of course, I'm sure there's a crowd, right? There's always a crowd with Jesus, and the disciples are there, and probably the Pharisees. So this is a really good thing for us, I think, to observe. Is the man that he's talking to is a skilled man, a smart man, a man who is used to understanding the law. And Jesus said, What does the law say? And so by law, he's talking about the books of the law: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Okay, so this is a man who is skilled in knowing not just the law of God, which was basically the over-encompassing law of that land at that time, but he's also understanding the specific laws too that apply to the land. So this is a man who argues, debates, wins, all these types of things. He's like the Johnny Cochran, right? Just to go for a famous guy here, the Johnny Cochran of their day, possibly. Yet he knows God at some level, and he's answering Jesus's questions correctly, right? So this is a different kind of guy. And he's talking to an intelligent man, a man who is well versed in culture and society. And I think it's important for us to know this, because although this conversation is directed to all of us, it's directed towards somebody who is saturatedly living in the culture. This isn't a nomad out in the desert who shows up every now and then. He's living amongst people. And he's even probably looked to by people around him for answers on some level, I would imagine. So for us to take this in is to understand this guy's fully saturated in his culture, as we are fully saturated in living in our culture today, right? There's not a lot of shepherds, because back then there were a lot of people who lived on the outskirts of town who weren't always engaged in communities the same way we are. And today, because of social media, we're much more engaged. So, all right, let's dive into this. So verse 29, Jesus replied, A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he fell among robbers, who stripped him and beat him and departed, leaving him half dead. Now by chance, a priest was going down that road. When he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So likewise, a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, and passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he journeyed, came to where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion. He went to him and bound up his wounds, pouring an oil and a wine. Then he set him on his own animal and brought him to an inn and took care of him. And the next day he took out 2 denarii. He gave them to the innkeeper, saying, Take care of him, and whatever more you spend, I will repay you when I come back. Which of these 3 do you think proved to be a neighbor to the man who fell among robbers? He said, The one who showed him mercy. And Jesus said to him, you go and do likewise. Oh, it's so good. It's so good for the heart. It's so good for the heart. But it's a parable. You and I've got to make it a real story. We've got to find the people who don't look like us, who don't live like we live, the people who are different to us in our scope of this world, and we meet them where they are, with our resources, with our help, with whatever we can give to them. But the compassion thing is so good. I mean, we see it all over social media, don't we? People who are suffering, people who are hurting. And sometimes we're like, I don't get it. Well, you know what? The story of this man here, the Good Samaritan, did he get it? He didn't have to get it. You don't have to get it. You don't have to understand everybody's cause and everybody's reasons for doing things to have compassion for them. Because what was it about? It was about he sees him. So he sees the Good Samaritan, right? We see the people who are suffering, who need our encouragement or our resources in some way, right? We see them first. And then we do what? We go to them. We move towards them with compassion in our hearts. And then we find out, how can we help? And this guy is giving him, I don't think this should be lost here. Not only is he bound up his wounds, but he set him on his own animal. I think there's a reason why it says own animal. And I don't necessarily know the answer to that, but I think it's just the possessive thing of it is this guy owned this animal, right? He probably took care of this animal. He's probably going to sit on this animal later, knowing there's going to be some blood, some dirt, some junk on it from this guy, right? And he sets him up there on his animal where he would sit, right? And he takes care of the of this man, of this hurting man. And it's interesting, this guy has been stripped. He fell among robbers, beat him, and left half dead. And these other people are walking by with no compassion in their hearts. Maybe they even had some level of compassion. Maybe it was there. Maybe compassion was there on some level. But there was not enough to do anything about it. We got to do something about it here. And Jesus says, this is your neighbor. This is your neighbor. The person who is different from you. The person who lives a different life than you, right? The Good Samaritan, the Samaritan did not think that the differences were enough to stay away. He probably recognized the differences as he came along. This is not a path probably Samaritans took, right? You're a little bit away from where they live maybe. So this is a stranger, a foreigner, and he goes over to him and he gives of himself freely. He does the full job. Like, this guy's committed money and, just his presence and his time, right? He took him back and he took care of him overnight. And then he comes out and says, and then there's this future commitment like, hey, 2 denarii, I'll be back. I'll repay you more when you come back. When I come back. So there's a commitment there towards this person. So what does this mean? What does this mean? So we know the Good Samaritan, hey, he's the guy. He's awesome. He's doing the right thing. He's living the life, right? He's not a real character, by the way, right? It's a story, it's a parable from the scriptures. And Jesus often used parables to introduce us to his most absolutely crucial and important ideas and thoughts. This is how Jesus taught his followers and the people who weren't his followers, the people who asked him questions. He taught them through stories. And this story is so important, maybe one of the most important stories in the scriptures for our world today, because there are so many differences we are finding in each other that we never even knew existed. I have friends here that I probably would have never known were Democrats if it wasn't for social media. Like, people in town back, 20, 30, 40 years ago, nobody really, maybe you knew who people voted for, but there weren't signs everywhere. There weren't things on Facebook, right? These were just people. And you went into a private voting booth and you voted. And people made phone calls and people went door to door, and maybe some people had signs in their yard. It's not like it is today. Like, if you're in it, you got a sign. And I'm in politics, so I get it. But it was different because sometimes those things prevent us from seeing beyond what we need to see. It's funny, for several months, I would go out to breakfast with the chair of the Democrats here in town. And I think I'm going to send him a message today, because we haven't been out in like 9 months together. I think I'm going to send him a message today because it's campaign season, and probably nothing could be better for the town right now and for the people in my area to see the chair of the Republicans and Democrats go out and get a bite to eat together. That would probably be a good thing, because I think that's how, he's running for office. I think he's kind of got a very much, I think he would probably admit, a very much an uphill battle, a struggle in the campaign this time. But yeah, I think that would be good. Jesus' stories are all rooted and based in this, in the scriptures, and they're rooted and based in what he tries to teach us with his words. And, he was telling them to, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul and all your strength and all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. So many people tell us to protect what we have. I was raised kind of that way. To protect yourself, to protect what you have, to protect what you've built. But the less we do that, the more we can become more like Jesus. The more we risk our positions, the more we risk our tribalisms that we live in today, the more we step out, the more God can do in us and through us. And so, as I'm talking to you about loving my neighbor as myself, I know that's what I have to do. I have to reach out to the chair of the Democrats. I've been avoiding, honestly, I've been avoiding him for months, like all get out, so that I wouldn't have to do this during campaign season and do this and all that stuff. So I think it's important that I do that. And I think it's important that you take action today too. How does it look like for you, in maybe even a hard way, for you to love your neighbor as yourself? Who do you need to be the Good Samaritan to today? God may give you the opportunity. So what are you going to do with it? If you have the opportunity to do something, what are you going to do? What am I going to do? Are these just words? Are we going to be the priest? Are we the Levite? Do we walk by and things just are what they are? Or does this actually mean something? Is this important to us? I think it's very important to us. And that's my encouragement to you and me today. To love our neighbor as ourselves. To reach out to the person that we need to reach out to right now today. One person. Think of the first person that comes to mind that you need to reach out to. And send that message. Make that phone call. Send that text. Whatever it takes. Go to their house. Make it happen. I think it's important. I think it's more important than you know. God lives with us, in us, as a follower of Jesus. And you and I have this gratefulness that should be embedded in us because of his love, and a reciprocal love back to him. And then that outflow becomes loving our neighbors as ourselves. I hope you are deeply challenged by this today, as I am. And I hope you take action. And these aren't just words. Too often, it's just words. Hey, it's a podcast. It's supposed to have words, right? But let's do more. So identify the one person, reach out, And please let me know how it goes. This is one podcast I would love for you to get back to me on. So I will let you know how it goes. I will come back and talk about it here, and hopefully very soon. And I think that matters. I think it really, really matters. So that's it. That's it. The Good Samaritan, the true story. I say the true story because we got that little bit of context in the beginning that mattered. The true story of the Good Samaritan. Hey, thanks for taking time to listen to the Thadcast today. As always, I'm feeling good. I just had energy from ID Life. If you want information on energy, I start every single day with tropical fruit energy. It makes me feel like $1,000,000. If you want information on ID Life, how to feel better, how to lose a few pounds, would you reach out to me today? I'd love that too. This is episode number 278 of the Thadcast. I would love it if you shared this with at least one friend today, or maybe even on social media. And don't forget to subscribe. And we're on the YouTube, back on the YouTube. I uploaded a ton of episodes yesterday. I promise I will be on it, like all over it from now on. So that's it for this episode. And until next time, my dear friends, may you be blessed.